Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall, where we throw ideas, see what sticks, and nurture those that do. I'm your host, Armando Leduc, an actor, entrepreneur, and coach, giving you insights that light up your world. We're here to explore the realms of business, marketing, and life, serving up a shot of inspiration with every episode. Ready to make ideas stick and grow them into something great? Let's dive in.
Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall. I am your host, Cannon Spears. I am not Armando. I'm not nearly as good looking or charismatic, but I will be your host today as I bring through Doug C. Brown. Doug is the founder of CEO Sales Strategies. He's a globally sought after expert in sales revenue and profit growth. Doug has helped powerhouse companies like Intuit, CBS, Procter Gamble massively scale their sales performance. We're going to talk about his role with Tony Robbins and helping scale that company. Really excited to talk about that. And Doug, very excited to have you here.
Cannon, thanks so much for having me here. And I do disagree that you're not as equally good looking as Armando. So
thank you. Too kind. Well, tell me a bit about yourself. Tell me about your background and how you got started with CEO Sales Strategies.
So my background really is 60 years ago when I was at age 3, I started working for my father.
Okay.
And my dad had an industrial machinery repair company and sales and service. All us boys, there was 4 of us. We all worked with my dad. By the time we were 5 or 6, they were pushing us out to write orders. And of course, there was 14 people in the company. So we had some assistant. I wish I had some of my orders from back then because they're probably all like little chicken scratchy, stuff. But anyways, that's kind of where I got the power of leverage, the concept of leverage, because I remember writing an order one day and going, we paid $10 for this part. We sold it for 20. I'm making 25 cents an hour. I'm working 40 hours. I'm making $10. I just did this in 8 minutes. So there's something here, right? Yeah. And so to fast forward, since then, I've been involved in over 35 businesses at this point, and some have done terribly, some have broken even, and some have done really great. Some have actually sold off in collective. I was part is a couple $1 billion. So, I learned a lot. I still learn a lot as I go along. The way CEO Sales Strategy started, frankly, was kind of on a double dare from a friend of mine. And he said, you have this mathematical metrics-based predictable revenue system that you've implemented at Chet Holmes, Tony Robbins, CBS, television, all these big names. Like, why don't you just bring this out? And I'm like, I work with a few people on and off, but I don't really want to. And he said, I double dog dare you to do it. And I said, all right, you want to do that? And I did. And so we started a podcast called the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. And, not really to my surprise, but to my delight, it just caught right from the beginning. And I've been having a heck of a lot of fun teaching people how to do this. It's been wonderful. We have a couple other businesses that we're involved in, other than, so that's how it came about. And we've been doing this now with CEO Sales Strategy. I think we're going on 4 years now with CEO Sales Strategies.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned your mathematical formula, and would love to chat a bit more about that. You don't have to spill all your secret sauce, but as much as you want. I'm curious.
Yeah, the math is the math. Look, here's the thing. All of you are listening going, math, blah, right? And I do the same thing. I'm not really a great mathematician, and you don't have to be. This is basic math. It's addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. And I do surround myself with good people with good math. Even my wife, she has a master's in mathematics, so it's a lot easier for her to figure out the formulas. But the reality is business is straight. Money in, money out equals something. Loss, break even, profit. That's really the formula for business. Now, everybody, you get involved in CPAs and things like that. They'll break it down more, cost of goods sold, gross profit, net profit, all that stuff. But the reality is it's really basic math. And so how do we apply metrics to this mathematical formula? And so we track metrics and we measure the ratios between metrics and we apply math to them. And the more effective we can get and the more efficient we can get, the higher your profit will be. The more, so if we reduce, for example, time, money, labor, energy, or we increase process systems, skill levels of people, all that will improve profit. To improve revenue, we just take these metrics and we measure between the metrics, and then we optimize these metrics, and magically revenue will go up. But it's predictable, because once you understand what the math is, then it's like, okay, what percentage point do we want to get above and beyond that, and how do we achieve it? That's really the basic formula. I can go into more detail if you want to, but that's the overview.
Where within your line of work, where did you start developing this kind of formula? I mean, I listed Intuit, CBS, like where did this kind of framework and formula start getting developed and you getting attached to it?
Yeah, it actually started in my dad's business.
Okay.
Because, as we were growing up, my dad was super brilliant, like engineering, type guy, right? And people sought him out from all over the country to come and help them fix problems within industrial machines and all kinds of stuff I didn't really understand, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But he was good at that. And so we, as the family, would start to be there. And as I start to get a little older, I started figuring out some of these things. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So our inventory, for example, is this, but we're holding on to our inventory for this long, and then we're getting taxed on this inventory at the end of the year. And so if we were able to push the inventory out faster, then we would be able to reduce our cost structure by getting higher volume discounts, for example, with vendors, right? So it's just little tiny things like that. And then obviously if we could unload our inventory by the end of the year, we didn't have to have this tax complication, all these things that were going on in my little head at like 10 years old, right? So I think I was just sort of groomed into this in some regards. I don't know if my dad hired us because he needed low-cost labor or if he just wanted to show us. Yeah, training, right? He died early and I didn't get a chance to ask him that question. And but what really started hitting was when I started working with businesses and companies, and in particular, when I did this stint with Chet Holmes, which eventually became Chet Holmes and Tony Robbins, and I stayed with those guys for 7 years as an independent president of sales and training. When I talked to Chet the first time, Chet said he's running radio ads on Sirius Satellite XM radio, and then that would come into a queue. They'd sell him a $229 training, which was awesome. And then from there, they would sell them products and services from $4,000 to $12,000, $15,000 and up, right? And so, but he said, Doug, I'm running 24% in the red on the front end of this model. And I'm like, your training is awesome. Why would you run, So I looked through all the numbers, his radio ads, they're expensive if anybody's ever run radio. And what I noticed is I started measuring the ratios. And what I realized, Cannon, was one big glaring thing. Well, there were two. Firstly, we had a 16% refund rate on the training. And I was like, ow, that's crazy. So then I went back and I said, okay, where metric A to metric B, where is this going to 16 points in the negative? And it turns out that once you understand the metrics and you start to investigate these metrics and look at the math on these metrics, they'll tell you a story and then you got to investigate. So I did. And what I did is I listened to the presentation, and in the presentation, they were actually inviting the refund. And so their trainers were going something like this. It was an awesome training. The training was awesome. So people, they would go and they'd say, hey, all right, we're at toward the end of this training. Let's add up our numbers, what we got today. And they would say, Cannon, what did you get with all applying these concepts? And you'd go, well, I got $145,000. Joe, what did you get? I got 600,000. Mary, what did you get? 2.8 million. And they would go, okay, so great. And this is what they would say. guys and gals, if you didn't feel we earned our $229 today, if you don't feel like you got overwhelming value, if you don't feel like this was the best training you've ever attended in your life, I want you to call right now, 1-800-GET-A-REFUND. And we'll give you your money back. That's 1-800-GET-A-REFUND, right? And so they would go on for like a minute saying that. And I'm like, whoa. These people just said they got $1 million or $145,000. Certainly worth $229.
Yeah.
So then I went back in and I changed the language a little bit. We would add up just like we did. And then what I changed was I said, we added up all the numbers. I said to the trainers, write down the total. And so they wrote down the total. And then at the end, we would say something like, okay, folks, we got $28,374,642 on this call today. Everybody go, woohoo, right? We'd use a little Tony Robbins line. And then we would say these words. I think we've earned our $229 today. What do you think? Yes? And everybody would go, yes, you did. And refund rates fell within 2 days from 16% to under 1%.
That's great. Love it. Yeah.
And the reason I'm telling people this story is it's a very simple metric, but think about it. They're driving 1,000 to 3,000 leads a week through this process. And now you've got 16% moving to the next stage. So what happens to your revenue at that point? Static close rate, at that time was 17.8%. So almost 20%. So 20% of those people now move through the funnel and would buy something larger.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we got that close rate from 17.8% to 43.2% by doing the same type of thing I'm talking about.
Wow.
Right? Compounding.
Yeah. What I love about that is the shift, just this very subtle shift of kind of an individualistic mentality versus like a group mentality. Like we as a group got this much value as a whole. And so you're going to very naturally dissuade people from breaking ranks from this kind of group mentality. And so just very little psychological shifts that are still truthful, like not manipulative, but
no, but it's definitely not manipulative. We went from not inviting them to refund to proving our worth and providing value to them 100%. Because they felt, oh my God, I spent for $229. I just got 18 X return, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's value proposition. And so without measuring the math and the metrics between that, you'll never find these little, optimization points or large optimization points. With Intuit, for example, it was messaging. And so Intuit, we had I coached one of the guys in Intuit for a while. And then he said, could you look at this $100 million division? We're losing $10 million a year. And within a year, they went from a $10 million loss to a $7 million gain on that particular. And by measuring this stuff, we discovered that their messaging was off to the right target buyer. And so when we corrected the messaging, bam, everything started working again. So, these are big companies, but smaller companies make these mistakes every single day as well. And they just don't measure this stuff.
Yeah. Before this call, we're just kind of cutting up and you said that you're not you don't want to get into ops at all. Like you're just that visionary. I'm like, but all of this stuff that you're saying, like these systems, like measuring, you're closer than maybe you'd realize with the vision of the of efficiencies and measuring and getting that data.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I am that creative brain, if you will, but it's kind of created in that like you could probably hear when I talk about these things, I get a little more excited, right? Because to me, it's like somebody wants to be an archaeologist, they want to discover something, right? I find discovery in that process, and a lot of great things have happened. Like I had a client, I started out with them, they were doing 3.5 million, and we went from, in the first 2 years, we went from 3.5 million to 6 million just doing this.
Nice.
And then in their third year, it took them about 15 months. So the next 15 months, we re-engaged afterwards, and they went from 6 million to 10 million. And then a company came along and snapped them at a really high valuation. Mm-hmm. that was gratifying because it was a family business and they got to retire and people got to buy new homes, and it's all about quality of life. And we all work really hard as an entrepreneur or business owner. And why not maximize the effectiveness and the efficiency? I mean, it really is working smarter, not harder, and gaining more out of what we're already doing. Yep. But a lot of times it just takes somebody from the outside to actually look in and go, why is there red paint here? Somebody, what are you talking about? We never had red paint there. Well, it's under here, right? And so it's one of those things that seems to happen. And I just have developed a process for this and an affinity to do it.
Okay. I want to pivot into sales training. I mean, you mentioned that briefly. Walk me through the process that you have on like onboarding salespeople, and like what do you look for in that kind of role and the placement?
Have we hired them yet, or we haven't hired them yet?
I'd like to talk about both. So
okay. Well, you're the host. I'll talk about whatever you want to do. So all right. So here's the thing about hiring. When it comes to salespeople, folks, if you're listening to this intently, write this down. You can't hire a salesperson the same way you hire somebody internally in your company. It is a different process. They are different animals. They think differently. They act differently. Some of you already know what I'm talking about. If you don't, if you've hired salespeople and you've worked with them, they're usually a lot more emotional than your other employees. Right? So, and most people want high performers. So those high performers have certain characteristics and demands. And so when you try to apply the same principle of hiring someone else to hiring a salesperson, it is a mismatched formula. Okay. Now, salespeople, I'll talk about top producers. Top producers want to be in an environment where they can make a lot of money, stand out, have the support, and be challenged on a regular basis. If you think about most of your employees in your company, they don't have those characteristics. Maybe some. But when I'm talking about being challenged, that's why they wake up every day. They're like, hey, we're a new challenge to sell something new, to persuade somebody to get here, to get there, right? So we've got to look at, what are we hiring for? What do we want them to do? And then the first place to start is to write down a detailed blueprint description of exactly what you want them to do and what the outcomes are. And this is where people blow it, because they write an ad that's something like this: top producer wanted, top compensation package, vacations, trips, this, that, this. Top producers don't give a care about that, right? What they want to know is, what's my working environment? What's my potential earnings? What kind of support do I have? Do we have any problems in the company that will prevent me from it happening to be able to achieve this? How do I, some of them have driven egos. How do I stand out in the crowd? Maybe, like that type of thing. And so we must write the ad for that. And so I did a lot of this at Chet Holmes. We used to write what we call the superstar ad. So what we look for is, what's the balance between ego, confidence, not arrogance, and empathy. Okay. A true desire of how to help people, and can they fit this description? And so, for example, if you wanted somebody, like I used to hire people there, radio ad to a sales queue, people driving down the highway, we needed to get the credit card for $229. You hear every objection on the planet. Listen, I'm in LA traffic. I can't pull my credit card out right now, I left my credit card at home. Who are you? I called in for a report, right? These type of things. So you needed somebody who had high ego state, but not arrogant. And we also needed people who could relate to people. So like if we are hiring for coaching, we want higher empathy. Yeah. Still a sales position. So you get clear on these things, and then what do you want them to do? And you write an ad. That ad needs to be specific. And if you want kind of a reference, there's a guy named Ernest Shackleton. Long time ago, he did this expedition to the Arctic, and he wrote an ad that said,
familiar.
Right. That's a great type of ad. Men wanted for a courageous journey. Yeah. Survival unlikely. It was that type of thing.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, your high performers will respond to those. And so once you got that, now you want them to be specific about what they want to do. You drive them from that to, let's say, a web page that tells them everything they need to know, and give them instructions. If they can't follow the instructions, they're out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the beginning of the process.
Okay.
Now, once you hire them, then they expect training, step-by-step process, all of these things that happen. Now, if you don't have that, folks, you put that in your ad. You put that in your or put it in your first conversation with them. You say, look, here's the reality of what's happening in the company. Like I went into a company one time, they were doing 48 million and they were plummeting. And I looked at the metrics. In Canon, they had an 82% turnover of their employee base every year.
Wow. So much wasted money on training, just retraining.
It's crazy. Yeah. And it was the CEO. So I went to the CEO and he said, what do you think? I said, I know what the problem is. He said, what? I said, you're not going to like it. He goes, well, tell me. I said, I'm looking at it. You have 3 salespeople in your organization who are going through your organization and creating havoc within your organization. You know who they are, and you're not firing them. And he said, well, okay, what do we do? I said, let's move them to a different island. Right? And we did. And all of a sudden, retention started going up and productivity started going up. Right. So once you are going to hire them, they expect that they can get up and run quick, right? They're not waiting. So if you don't have that in place, you tell them up front, look, we got a few bumps in the roads. I'm actually working with a client right now, and their leads aren't dialed in the way they're supposed to. And they provide leads to the sales team, and they're providing really a lead. Like there's lead, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, sales ready lead. We really want them to be in the sales ready lead sector, but they're providing marketing leads at best. So they're having a really hard time on the close. And so when we're hiring people, we're telling them, look, this is going to take 2 to 3 months to fix this issue. Now your top producers go, no problem, I'll work around it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what they do. So, or this isn't the environment for me right now. I need something quicker. Better to know up front than to make a bad hire and then have that turn into a loss for you down the line.
Yeah, going back to your previous example of like that really great ad for the Antarctica journey, it's like just be honest about where you're currently at, and your top performers that you're looking for are going to see that as a challenge to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look at it like you're entering into a marriage.
Yeah.
You don't walk into a marriage and if you do, and both people are not revealing the truth about what the truth is, once you're in that marriage, then you're like, wait a minute, you didn't tell me about this. You didn't tell me about, what do you mean you were married already and you never got divorced, right? That type of thing would come up, and it's like, oh my gosh, right? So you don't want any of those surprises later on, and all this is preventable. One big thing that everybody should do, regardless if they listen to anything else, is have a structured interview. You ask the same questions to every single person. Because just like you would lead score a lead, you got to lead score the people who are coming through. And if you don't have the same baseline, then it's subjective.
Nothing to measure by.
Yep.
Yeah, man, I like it. I do want to make sure that we are hitting on the topic of today, your going more into detail about your experience with Tony Robbins, Chet Holmes. Tell me a bit more about that. You mentioned it previously about how you started applying some of that formula into injecting it and assisting there. So tell me about the big wins that you had. there?
There were numerous actually. So thank you for asking because I get to brag a little. So
Yeah.
no. So I mean, the biggest one was we had well, there were a lot of big ones. Like their training team, as I said, their presenters team, we took their close rate from 17.8% to 43.2%.
That's crazy. That's great.
Right. And that happened within 4 months. So I mean, imagine the numbers just were like zoop, going right up. Right. We took their average coaching sale that was $1,500 a month for 6 months, so $9,000, and we turned that into a $24,000 sale.
Oh,
right. So we took the close rate on the coaching side and improved it. The front end side of the sales team was 12.1%, and we got that to 21.2%. So the reason I'm giving all these percentages and numbers is I want people to understand when you start stacking all this stuff together, you get compounding interest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the biggest win that we took was something they had called the sales mastery system. And the sales mastery system was an awesome program, an awesome product. So firstly, Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, super intelligent guys, really great to work with. They produced results, and the whole process was amazing. But they had this thing called the sales mastery system, and they were selling it for $895 at the time, and it was just a digital program. And when I was looking through the metrics, I noticed, they're driving a lot of leads. And so what I noticed is I started breaking down the metrics on what size company in what industry was buying what.
Okay.
Now, back then we didn't have AI. So this took me a week and a half to sit down with spreadsheets, right? So a couple of big things came out of that. Number one is I found almost 170,000 leads over the time period that were never followed up on.
Okay.
At $13 a piece, run the numbers. And right. So we immediately, any new sales team members that were wanting to come on, we would immediately make them crawl back through those leads. And believe it or not, they had to get 2 sales. So we were getting leads that were 2 years old, and people were saying, man, I was wondering where you were. I submitted this thing, right? And they would sell them. And some of those leads actually escalated up to over $50,000 in sales.
Wow.
So the first lesson, folks, is if you have dormant buyers or people not following up, boost your revenues there. And so the second thing, but what I think was probably the biggest win that people cue in on that sales mastery system, they weren't really selling a lot of it. In fact, they were selling about $86,000 a year of that program.
Okay.
But in the data, what I realized was on the $4,000 and up offers, companies that were doing under $300,000 were buying at about a 1.5%.
Okay.
But we were producing a lot of leads there. Really, almost 70% of the leads coming in were that. So that was another reason that they were 24% underwater, is because they weren't monetizing that 70% of the leads, really. Well, 68.5%. Right. So what I did is I said, okay, the math shows there's a challenge, but the math also shows there's a whole lot of people coming through who want something.
Yeah.
Right. So now you got to go and look at the math and say, where's the story? And I couldn't figure it out. So I'm like, I'll call these people. And I called them and I said, why didn't you buy? What were you looking for when you did buy? And they all told me very similar things. And then you look for the overlapping answers. And it turned out that they wanted to get sales. So in fact, a business that's under $1 million, they only should be focused on selling in their first year until they get to $1 million. So what I did is I took the same system, didn't change the training whatsoever, and I added 6 weeks of group coaching to it. And I raised the price from $895 to $1,450. And so I widened our margins out quite a bit because group coaching costs little to nothing to put on. And we represented it. And we went from $86,000 in sales to our first year at almost $8 million in sales with that same product.
Oh, wow.
And so, ba-boom, right? So your revenue goes up, your profitability goes up because you're not wasting all these leads any longer. And now this was just on that sale, the 8 million. The fun part was some of these people were now escalating up and buying $35,000 programs.
Well, they got that much value.
After the first 1450, whoop, up, right? So we ended up getting increased buying frequency, increased transactional value, all of these things. And this is what people should be looking for in their business, from my opinion, right? Because, company after company after company that I've done this with, sees growth and sometimes hyper growth. So be careful of that too, because growing too fast is not always recommended.
Yeah. And so just a recap, all that huge explosion of growth came from you looking at the numbers, you just digging in a little bit, taking that week and a half to just dig a bit, seeing where the discrepancies were. And really the only major change to the offer you made was just adding that 6 weeks, 6 months,
6 weeks,
6 weeks of group coaching, and then just rebranding as you're also increasing the price. But you're solving that problem that they're not getting sales, right? Like that was the problem that you're trying to solve with the group coaching. And then you see this massive bump. That does not sound that complicated.
I'm not that smart. I think I'm pretty intelligent, but the reality is it's in the math, it's in the measurement, right? The thing is that people are so busy working in their businesses all the time, they just can't step back out of that. And I have to force myself to do that as an owner of companies, because I know not if I don't, then and what I want people, if they're like, well, that sounds really good, like just think about some small little thing like in your life today. How many recurring subscriptions do you have going on that you're being billed for monthly or annually that you don't even use?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I think almost everybody can relate to that type of issue, right? And so, like, if you cut out, let's say it's only $1,000 that you have in recurring subscriptions, but you cut that $1,000 out now, that $1,000 is pure profit because you weren't using it, right?
Yep.
So it's a very similar concept, but what if you did that across 40 areas of your business over time? So frankly, if you did it over, most times we are looking at 11 or 12 core ways of doing this. And if you do that alone, you could literally, amp your business up, sometimes even double it.
Yeah. And I love it. I love the example and the simplicity to solving that problem and just the growth that comes from that. I have a fun question here. If you had to restart with nothing but your sales brain, what's the first thing you'd sell and how?
Wow. That's an excellent question. The first thing that I would sell, well, for me, I think the first thing I would sell would be my expertise. I would package that and sell it for two reasons. One, I know I can deliver on that. And so, I play win-win-win. Like if they don't win, I don't win, and someone else doesn't win, it's not a good deal. So that would be the first thing that I would package, and I would go out and sell. I've never been asked that question. It's a super interesting question. I was like, oh, what will we go sell, right? But selling's not a big deal for me because I look at it, and I always have. There's three reasons people buy: they have a problem, they want to gain some opportunity, or they have some goal they've been trying to hit and they want to hit that. For me, selling's helping those people get what they were looking for. And then they will, do a value exchange in some type of, normally monetary, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's all, if you think back to the bartering system, Cannon, that was selling.
Yep.
Right. Hey, I have some corn, you have some wheat. Let's trade off, right? That was a sale.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that it's not, Dan Pink wrote this book called To Sell is Human. And it talks about that. And it's a great book. And it's true. The best salespeople in the world are children. because they're unfiltered.
That's true.
and they ask all the probing questions. Why does this happen? How come that's so, like, what makes that work, right? Like, how do you feel about this, right? They ask these questions, and they're great questions to ask. But when we become adults, we have it, oh no, you can't talk to people like, don't say that question to somebody, right? But the reality is, when you get into selling, you've got to use those questions again. And that's why I think children are the best salespeople in the world.
Yeah, I love it. I personally think that there's just a lot of marketers or businesses out there that just try to overcomplicate things. Sales being one of those things. And just like you said earlier, and just now, like it's really not that complicated. It's just communication on a human level. I can solve your problem. Will you let me solve your problem?
Right. And there's a yes or no or possibility, right? That they'll say. It's only one of three things. No, I don't want any help. Yes, I do. Great. We all like that. Or I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. And, so the challenge with I'm not really sure or no is people start to try to prove them wrong. So a lot of times when people are saying that, they're just in fear. Like every objection on the planet that I've ever traced back, and again, I'm a little metric geeky guy. I trace it back. It always comes to some level of discomfort, which is some level of fear.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is move them from fear to neutral, and then neutral to confidence. But the reality is people are trying to move them from fear to confidence so quickly that it feels top down. And so people then dig in emotionally. And when they dig in emotionally, they anchor that emotion now, not to the actual objection, they anchor it to the person. So now you got two problems. You've got one fear and one anger, which is also fear, really, when it's traced back, but now it's directed to the person. So it's not a hard thing. And, again, it's watch kids. Kids play win-win. You throw an ice cream cone in with a kid, and there's four other kids around, most of the time they'll eat that ice cream cone together, right? They'll share it and dripping ice cream all over them, right? Until they start to get filtered by the adults saying, no, that's not good. You got germs. No, and then, biases and everything. So, business to me is simple until you add people, then it gets complicated.
Yeah. And that's good. What would you say, just kind of wrapping up here, like what does the future look like for CEO sales strategies? Like what's the direction that you're trying to hit, and like what big goals that you're like what's coming next?
Well, so we've been talking about this. I don't know if Armando told you to ask this question, but no, we actually just having active conversations about this because, we help people usually one-on-one, right? We're helping people one-on-one. And what's bothering me in this world right now is I'm talking to a lot of people young and my age, right? And
so young.
Well, the young ones are in their 20s, right? So I'm listening. I have two daughters, and they're both in their 20s, and I listen to their friends talk about, I don't ever think I'm going to be able to, afford a home. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, right? And then you're talking to the 40 to 50-year-old, they're like, I want to get the heck out of my corporate job or whatever, but I don't really know what to do. And then you talk to the 50 and up, and they're like, I'd like to retire, but man, I run out of money between 8 and 12 years if I liquidate everything.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, how do I solve this challenge for people? Because this is crazy. And so I was like, why don't I teach them how to do revenue growth and profit growth? And I'll help them make a six-figure, multi-six-figure income on their own, because it's certainly doable.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think CEO sales strategies is going to go. We're actively thinking about how to do that. And the good thing about revenue growth and profit growth is you really don't have to know a lot about sales in order to do it. You just have to be able to follow and measure the metrics. So, if you know more about sales, which we do teach them, I would teach them in the process. But the how to maybe give them a turnkey process to do that. That's where I think that's going on the CEO sales strategy side.
Yeah, that's exciting. Opening it up to maybe a broader audience and kind of like broadening the messaging, but solving very, very specific, sticky problems like that. It's super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Well, where can listeners learn more about you and follow you on? Would love to shout you out on your socials, website.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if they want to connect directly, they could just send me an email at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. I do have 2 people who answer my email, but they will inform me and then I will answer you for sure. If they want to learn a little more about me, they can go Doug Brown 123 is my LinkedIn, or just type Doug C. Brown revenue growth, and I'll be everywhere on that process. Why am I everywhere? Because we've worked on making me everywhere in that regard. I do have Instagram, Doug C. Brown _, and Facebook the same. Now, when they type in, if they type it in, put the C in the middle, like Doug C. Brown, because Doug Brown was a professional hockey player for the Detroit Red Wings, and
it's not you.
It's not me, and I can't skate very well. So,
all right,
so that's the game.
Great. Well, appreciated having you on here and talking about your background. I learned a lot, and I'm gonna be taking some avid notes off of this and applying. So appreciate you being so open and sharing with us.
Ken, and thanks for having me on. This has been fun, and I appreciate you're a great interviewer. So thank you.
Well, you're too sweet. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch y'all next time.